So, 1968 is a giant year for the United States. I mean, just a whole bunch of stuff happens here. There's the Olympics, Mexico City. You have Tommy Smith and John Carlos, who are running the 200 meters, finishing first and third. And in between, there's an Australian, and he gets tied into this protest, and he knows about it. And he wears a pin on his jacket there. I don't know if you can see all three of them wearing that pin. That's like a white circle, humanitarian pin. So it's a protest against what's happening, and almost all of the black athletes decided that they were going to protest before the Olympics started, but they decided instead that they would go. So Peter Norman is the white Australian, and he stands in solidarity wearing that humanitarian badge. You can't see in the picture, but they're not wearing shoes, and they each have one of those gloves, the black gloves. One of them forgot the gloves, and so that's why one has it on one arm and one has it on the other arm, because one of the guys forgot their gloves. So that's why they wore it. But that's the Black Power symbol, and during the national anthem, they look down and raise their fist in protest to what's happening in the United States to African Americans. We'll talk more about 1968 later when we get to politics. The Black Panther Party by 1969. Newton is in prison for manslaughter, and Bobby Seale is in prison for murder. The highest percentage of Black Panther is women. Women are the highest percentage of the entire group. Maybe connect that to women of the 20s that were the largest percentage of the KKK members. You have 28 Panthers that are killed in 1969 by police. And just to get you don't have to write the last one down, but the Illinois Party chairman, as they had different chapters of the Black Panther Party across the country, was given 4 years in jail for stealing $71 worth of ice cream bars. Okay. So that gives you the idea of how much the government was interested in making sure that these Black Panthers and their power and influence in society were limited within their reach to people. You have to write this down either, but this is an examination of what is happening with the Black Panthers and the government response to it. Black Panther experience was doubly tragic. First, they were blind to the fact that you can't make a revolution in a country where most people support the government. And second, because the government couldn't see that either and persisted in treating a head cold as an epidemic. So just somebody's perception here as there wouldn't have been a reason for a revolution or enough people to be behind the revolution, and the government overreacted in treating the Black Panther Party in this guy's perception. Okay, so I told you before, Black Studies becomes something that African Americans want to have in universities to learn about their own history. And so the Black Panther Party helps students at San Francisco State press the administration for a Black Studies department. The Black Studies features history, culture, some propaganda, and some activist training. Comes in controversy as some fight over the control of the curriculum. So what is being taught is in question. Some want segregated facilities, and that is the black nationalism, that is the separation. So they're fighting segregation in the South with nonviolent movements, and they're fighting in other places for segregation and for black nationalism and a separate country. So what happens here is there's not enough money, and so the program ends, and that's not acceptable for the Black Panthers and the black societies here in Northern California. So the president, Robert Smith, decides that he's going to quit rather than suspend the Black Studies professor who told the students to bring guns to campus to protest this shortage that would lead to the end of the program. And so you have violent strikes that follow. And then you have a new president that takes a hardline approach and brings in the city police and fires the chair of the Black Studies Department. So, after the effects, some leaders opposed the Black Studies, And their reasoning is it's not harmful to anybody, but how does it improve their status in society? What can you do with a Black Studies degree? And so finding that graduates wouldn't be able to get jobs, but they have a college degree because it's in Black Studies, it doesn't lead to really anything. It's kind of like history. If you get a history degree, you get to be a history teacher or work at a museum, right? So find a degree that can lead towards a career, at least in this capitalistic society. So a luxury that minorities couldn't afford by just getting a higher education in Black Studies, not leading towards some sort of economic gain or change in their lifestyle or standard of living. Okay, then you have other revolutions that happened during this time. National Organization for Women, Black Panthers quiz, Black Power quiz, National Organization for Women quiz, known as NOW, forms in 1966, take action to bring women into full participation in the mainstream of American society now. Okay, so very clever with their name, and it fits here for women trying to get full equality and participation. A lot of laws banning sex discrimination in work and education. Maternity leaves for working mothers. Government funding for daycare centers. Sounds familiar, right? All of these kinds of things still looking and fighting for. Equal Rights Amendment, we'll talk about that in the next chapter. That will be denied by, it won't get to ratification. It will go through Congress as an amendment, but not get ratified by the states. Repeal of laws that prohibited abortion or restriction of birth control. Okay, so we'll see those then challenged then in the next decade as well with Roe v. Wade. Women's Liberation Movement. Red Stocking Manifesto, written in 1969. Women are an oppressed class. That's what it claims. We are exploited as sex objects, breeders, domestic servants, and cheap labor. So you got the 50s, right? And the 60s are a response to the 50s, not wanting to end up the same as their parents. So this makes sense. Argued men in control was the prime cause of exploitation, racism, and war. We saw that in the 50s in books that were written, right? And so this is being carried out with movements during the 60s and then in the 70s as well. You got women's studies. That will be a pattern that you'll see through all of these kinds of revolutions, is they want something that can be taught to the next generation, right? Exposing things, indoctrination, however you want to view it. They want their voices heard. They want to have the next generation learn about their struggles in society and what can be done and changed about the future. Kate Millett's Sexual Politics. This is the cover of Time. Women's Liberation Movement, published in 1970. A Sexual Revolution. Do away with traditional inhibitions and taboos. Right? The double standards. Men can do this, women can't. And what are the expectations then of women when it comes to sex? So this denounces male supremacy, draws a distinction between biological differences and learned behaviors. Okay, so bringing in psychology into this, and the suppression of women within their ability to go out there and explore with their bodies, to be able to find pleasure and be free. Okay. So then you have the gay liberation movement. There's a riot that happens in New York at a gay club, and it's known as the Stonewall Riot. The police raid this club, and what it leads to is an organization, which is the GLF, the Gay Liberation Front, and this really becomes a coming out party for the gay parts of society. And this quote here: complete sexual liberation for all people cannot come unless existing social institutions are abolished. Okay, so this will bring attention to what the plight is of gays in society. And in many states, you had laws against being gay. It was illegal, right? And so this will lead towards gay pride parades. It's going to bring visibility, and people will come out and say that they are gay and not necessarily try to hide it like they were before. at least on a more extensive or massive level. The Chicano Rebellion. So you have Chicano as the preference to Mexican American. Instead of calling Mexican American, they wanted to call it Chicanos. So it's the Chicano movement. And they wanted recognition of a distinct culture, their specific Mexican American Chicano culture in the United States, known as La Raza. They had blowouts, or strikes, as they called them, blowouts, to demand educational reform. And a lot of this stuff will happen on the West Coast because that's where the migration from the Bracero programs and Mexican Americans will travel into southern states like Texas and Arizona and California and New Mexico. They demand Mexican American studies in universities, okay, to learn about the history of Mexican American people. Yeah, so the assimilation that was expected by the United States all the way from its beginnings is being turned upside down and challenged in every way during the 60s, and this is one example here with the Chicano Rebellion. Brown Berets were a group here in Los Angeles, formed in 1967, and they have their own newspaper. La Casa was the newspaper, and you can see the style of dress and the interest in their own pride in their own culture and history. So that was the Brown Beret movement. And you have Cesar Chavez, who leads a strike. First successful Union of Migrant Farm Workers, the UFW. And they will use nonviolent methods, economic protest, through the nationwide boycott of grapes. And that will come from all different poor, uneducated migrant groups, minorities that will join within this movement, Cesar Chavez, and the boycott. Then you have the American Indian movement, a group of Native American political activists. And you can see in the sign here, you can see the peace sign that represents the feathers, and it's got the hand that completes the head here. And this patch from 1890 to 1973, Wounded Knee, 1890. So remembering that and what happened to Native Americans throughout their history as expansion and overcomes the Native Americans moving westward. So here's one protest by Native Americans, Indians, that occupies Alcatraz. Alcatraz at the time was abandoned, but was federal land. And so they look at the law and say, oh, there was a treaty in 1868 that said the Indians could have rights to all unused federal land. And so as Alcatraz is no longer in use as a prison and is abandoned, they go and they settle on Alcatraz, claiming that it met the requirements of a reservation. So you have all of these different groups looking for their own identity and creating political movements and resistance to what is the established laws and government. The Asian American Political Alliance, Cal Berkeley, it will be the center of a lot of these different movements, and they will protest the Vietnam War, protest racism, and again, demand Asian studies programs. So what is being taught is a focus of these organizations. They want a variety of different things taught besides just what are American culture and the expectations of assimilation. Presidential election 1968. Johnson says, I'm out. I do not believe that I should devote an hour or a day of my time to partisan politics or any duties other than the awesome duties of this office. Accordingly, I shall not seek and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term. Well, he wasn't going to get it, but this is his way of bowing out. And you can see, well, maybe you can't, but if you look up pictures of Johnson as he came into office after Kennedy's assassination and what he looks like in 1968, he has aged so much within that time. You always look at the transformation of presidents and the stress of the job and see how much they age, even the younger ones like President Obama recently. But man, Johnson looks like a different person as he comes out of office after only 5 years. So he's out, and a lot of that has to do with Vietnam. and all of the civil rights movements. I mean, this is a very trying time for politicians. Okay, then you have, this is 1968, so remember I told you the Olympics as something that was important in 1968. You got the election in 1968, and Martin Luther King is assassinated in 1968 as well. He opposed the war in Vietnam. Okay, he was trying to get civil rights passed and saw that the Vietnam War was a focus and wanted to eliminate that as something that the United States was involved in so that they could focus on changing laws and changing behaviors and attitudes in the United States for society. So he speaks out against U.S. foreign policy and the connection to domestic policy. That's what I just explained. He's shot and killed April 4th, 1968 by James Earl Ray in Tennessee on a balcony in a hotel as he's there traveling as he normally was, giving speeches in different places and leading the organization of civil rights movements in different areas. So riots break out, not just there in Tennessee, but all across the country. In 1968, I think they estimate over 100 different riots after King's assassination. 27,000 were jailed that week after King's assassination within these riots in different places. So King's vision fades. He had lots of people that followed King that were surrounded within his close-knit team, but nobody really emerged to be able to have that same kind of passion and influence and leadership that King had. And so that nonviolence, Protestant Christian, Gandhi, civil disobedience, ideas of Thoreau, all of that King possessed, nobody is able to replicate that, and it's really unfortunate. Now, Robert Kennedy, he was assassinated in 1968, so he's one of these guys that is running, that is polling stronger in different parts of the country than President Johnson was, and so when Johnson gets out, Robert Kennedy's the front runner, and he is the brother to JFK. He was the Attorney General under Kennedy, JFK in his administration. He was a senator from New York. He is against the Vietnam War. Note that for a second here as we get to the other candidates. And he is shot by Sirhan Sirhan after one of these primaries in California in which he wins. And so that leads the Democrat Party without the frontrunner Kennedy and without Johnson, the incumbent president. George Wallace, he's an independent. He's really a Democrat, but he's running as an independent. He's the governor of Alabama. He's the segregation now and forever kind of guy. He's a known racist. He's for segregation. That's what's gotten to the governorship of Alabama. And they will also run with this states' rights platform, which will try to draw some other people into his ideas, anti-federal government. So he sees a vision to end the Vietnam War. Okay, so he's anti-Vietnam War as well, like Kennedy was. And he wants to increase Medicare and Social Security. Okay, so older people and social welfare programs within that. Then you have Hubert Humphrey, not a hippie. Get it? Humphrey? Okay, so he's a Democrat. He's the vice president, and he's going to run. He's a senator from Minnesota before that, a professor in political science, and that's what I have my degree in. Woo woo. He wants to continue the effort in Vietnam. All right, so keep fighting, try to win. Hold on to that containment, the Truman Doctrine, stopping communism from spreading. And he authorized the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Okay, so he's the one that wrote it, one of the part of the committee that wrote it, and he also was very influential in the Great Society programs that were put in by Lyndon Johnson. Then you have Richard Nixon. He's the Republican candidate. He lost to Kennedy in 1960, and he had disappeared for a while. Now he is back. He was vice president under Eisenhower. He was senator of California, and he has this secret plan to win in Vietnam, but he won't tell people what it is because it's secret. And if you gave the secrets, then it wouldn't be effective. So there's a movement here of the silent majority, and the people that wanted to go back to a simpler time, maybe connect it to the 1920s and the return to normalcy and the ideas of Harding. But that silent majority, the ones that will vote for Nixon, become important to his victory. And the Sun Belt, the conservative region from California all the way through Arizona and the Midwest will become important for Nixon as well. All right, here's the election results, 1968. The country here is different colors, so you can see in the dark red is Wallace, the far deep south. He's going to win those areas, as that's still a Democratic racist stronghold during this time, and they get 13% of the total popular vote. You have 43% that goes to Nixon, so that split there again in the Democrat Party will help another Republican obtain the presidential office. We'll see later in the 90s the opposite will happen, and that's how Clinton becomes president, with a split on the Republican side. But you have the Northeast there that's mostly Democrat, supporting Humphrey, and then the middle part of the country and the far west are Nixon. That's the Sun Belt region there from California, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Oklahoma. Those would be Sun Belt areas. Ooh, meme. A push with Clark, clutch. Alright, we're going to get into this next one, okay? So one more section. I'm going to stop the video here and start you on Nixon and his domestic policies and his presidency in the next section. See you then. Stay tuned. The revolution under A push will be televised through YouTube.